Karen called cops on my generator. I'm the state power grid inspector. She marched across my driveway like the world owed her silence. Hair perfectly curled, clipboard in hand, Bluetooth headset already chirping to 911. There's a man with a generator running illegally, she snapped, pointing at the equipment I was inspecting. It's way too loud and smells like chemicals. He refused to shut it down. I glanced up from my tablet, calm, focused, wearing a fluorescent vest with bold white letters across the back, California State Power Grid Inspector, and the generator. It was running because I had personally authorized a scheduled neighborhood emergency grid diagnostic. She didn't know that. She didn't ask. She just called the cops. By the time the cruiser rolled up and the officer's radio confirmed my credentials, Karen's voice cracked mid-sentence, and her HOA citation pad hit the pavement like a gavel dropped in shame. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just working that day. I was also investigating her, because that wasn't the first generator complaint she'd filed. And as I'd soon learn, it wasn't just about noise. It was about control and a network of fake HOA enforcement that had cost this town too much. When I moved to Pinefield Crest, all I wanted was a break from the noise. Not the literal kind I work with noise. I inspect and maintain energy systems across California, from battered desert substations to downtown transformers humming like oversized cicadas. I meant noise in the human sense, politics, bureaucracy, burnout. So I bought a modest single-story house on a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by oak trees and weekend grill smoke. The neighbors seemed polite. I didn't expect warm pies or welcome parties. Just peace. But in my line of work, peace is always temporary. And in Pinefield Crest, it came with a clipboard, passive-aggressive notes, and a woman named Karen who introduced herself to me with a knock, a smile, and a stack of violations. I hadn't even finished unpacking. My portable diesel generator was parked in the back standard issue for inspectors in wildfire zones. It was locked down, on its pallet, unplugged. Karen walked up my driveway in wedge heels and introduced herself as the president of the Pinefield Residential Compliance Board. I blinked. I wasn't aware there was an HOA. There isn't, she chirped. We're a preservation council. We maintain standards. She handed me a notice of mechanical intrusion. Violation unapproved industrial-grade equipment. Status immediate attention. Required fine $85 late fee if unpaid. Within 5 business days, I laughed. Thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The next day, I found a bright pink sticker on my garage. Non-compliant equipment observed on private property. Subject to further review. She had plastered it right next to the state-issued hazard clearance badge taped beside my utility rig, the very badge that lets me work in disaster zones. I went to her house that evening, badge in hand. She stood behind her front door like a Walmart greeter on Judgment Day. Karen, I said calmly, I work for the California Office of Power Grid Oversight. I don't need HOA approval to store state-licensed gear on my property. Your notices don't mean anything. She crossed her arms. Then maybe you don't belong in a community like this. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Let me be clear, I said. If you interfere with my work again, especially anything marked by the state, you'll be looking at a felony, not a fine. She smiled. We'll see. That weekend, the grid flagged Pinefield Crest for a rolling diagnostic. It happens. Routine, especially after record heat waves. My team coordinated a limited shutdown 2 blocks for 3 hours. Residents were notified, permits posted. I parked the generator in my driveway, started the feed test, and fired up the equipment like I'd done 100 times before. 28 minutes in, Karen walked into the middle of my driveway, screamed about fumes, and called 911. And that's when things blew up, because she didn't know she'd just interfered with a state-level power operation. She didn't know the cruiser pulling up already had my name on file not as a suspect, but as a credentialed state responder. And most importantly, she didn't know I'd been tracking her. For weeks, I'd heard rumors from my new neighbors, stories that didn't sit right. She said my husband's ham radio violated spectrum codes. We paid $40 for using a pressure washer on the wrong day. She warned us not to hang blackout curtains. They were military-looking. Every complaint traced back to Karen. every fine paid to her personal Venmo. So when she called the cops on me for running a state-permitted generator, I knew exactly what to do next. Because I wasn't just an inspector anymore. Now I was on a mission. Karen made one critical error. She assumed I only worked with wires. She didn't realize my real job was systems and her compliance board. That was the most broken system I'd ever seen. After the police left that day after confirming that I was authorized to operate heavy equipment during a scheduled grid, diagnostic, Karen vanished into her house like a cartoon villain, ducking behind curtains. The officer gave me a nod, muttered something like, "She's done this before," and left. That comment stuck with me. She's done this before. So I started digging. I filed a FOIA request with the county clerk, looked for any formal filings under the name Pinefield Residential Compliance Board. Nothing. I searched business registrations. Nothing. No HOA, no registered nonprofit, no articles of incorporation, just a group that lived entirely on Facebook, Google Docs, and printable PDF forms Karen handed out like parking tickets. So I turned to the neighbors. The first one I visited was Mr. and Mrs. Patel Kine, retired couple with solar panels and a habit of leaving oranges on people's porches. Karen had fined them once for solar panel glare affecting street visibility. Once for irregular garden edging. They paid both in cash because she said she'd file a report with the zoning board if they didn't. There was no zoning board. Just Karen. Then came the single mom, Elise. Karen told her the American flag she hung on her balcony was too aggressive. She paid $50 to avoid a formal review. Next, the Chen family. Fined for using a power washer on a Saturday, $90. The receipts added up fast. Venmo, Zelle, checks made out to PRCB. But the account numbers all traced back to Karen Reed's her personal bank account. I compiled everything into a file, screenshots, payment logs, testimonials, photos of the so-called violation slips. And then I found the code book, buried in her group's Google Drive. Yes, she had one. I found a document called Pinefield Compliance Bible, version 4.7. It had bylaws she wrote herself, complete with aesthetic color zones, acceptable civil tones for outdoor conversation, a clause banning diesel-based equipment in peace zones, a rule about drapery length reflecting community values, all completely made up, all presented with the authority of law, and worst of all, she wasn't acting alone. The codebook named 3 other compliance board members, people I'd seen her chatting with on porches, standing with during her sidewalk patrols. 2 of them worked in local real estate. One of them, Mr. Calloway, was president of the Neighborhood Watch. They weren't just tolerating Karen, they were benefiting, issuing non-compliance alerts right before open houses, warning potential buyers about unstable homes if the seller refused to pay a beautification fee. It was a shakedown, wrapped in soft HOA language and fake community jargon. So I did what I do best. I documented everything. Created a file I called the Karen Grid, color-coded, time-stamped, cross-referenced. By the time I was done, I had 42 households affected, over $31,000 in illicit fines collected, and an internal chat log from her private Facebook group where she wrote, "The state inspector is a problem. We need to cite him again, make him think he's the issue." That's when I stopped being curious and started getting ready to bring her down. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies. And to bring down a fake HOA, you don't need pitchforks. You need proof and a plan. You know what makes a system dangerous. Not just the person who abuses it, but everyone who knows it's fake and says nothing. The deeper I went, the more I realized Karen wasn't a one-woman show. She had a network, a quiet group of enablers who nodded at her fake authority because it gave them a false sense of control. But now I had 42 victims, thousands in fake fines, and a binder full of violations written in the same loopy cursive and phony legalese. I wasn't just going to the sheriff. I was going to flip the entire block. My first call was to Sheriff Delgado. He and I had crossed paths before, during state audits after the campfire blackouts. Straight shooter, hated red tape, trusted inspectors more than politicians. I sent him a PDF titled Karen's Grid, a fraudulent system disguised as compliance. 30 pages, 42 affidavits, one Venmo transaction log. He called me within an hour. "Let's burn this down," he said. But I wanted more than just justice. I wanted visibility. So I printed everything, every notice, every screenshot, and set up a community energy awareness night at the rec center. On paper, it was about emergency power protocols, but it wasn't about the grid. It was about Karen. The room filled fast. Dozens of residents, a few realtors, 2 council members. Even the town paper sent a guy with a yellow notepad and too much cologne. Sheriff Delgado stood at the front with me. So did Mrs. Patel. So did Elise, the single mom, and Mr. Callahan, the war vet Karen had tried to silence. I started with the basics. "Let's talk about the grid," I said, because that's what brought me here. And that's what exposed what was wrong. I showed the permits, the generator schedule, the legal authority I carried that day. Karen called the cops on me. Then I showed her notices. "None of these are real." I said, "Not one." Gasps, murmurs. Then I passed out the spreadsheet of fines. Every person on it present. That's when Elise stepped forward. "My kids stopped playing basketball because she said we were lowering property values." Then Mr. Patel. "She said our curtains looked too foreign." Then another, "She told my wife we didn't represent the community's vision." And then a fourth, tearfully, "She made my mother feel like she didn't belong in a house we built ourselves." Karen wasn't in the room, but her reign collapsed right there. Sheriff Delgado stepped up and announced a formal investigation. Karen would be served a cease and desist, her financial records subpoenaed, and her private Facebook group flagged for legal review under impersonation and harassment statutes. Then he dropped the mic. "No one in this county has the right to enforce law except those elected or sworn to do so." That means not Karen, not her clipboard, and not her little club. The room erupted. Applause, tears, and more importantly, unity. The next morning, a bright orange sticker appeared on Karen's garage door. "Fraudulent activity under review. Do not engage." Put there by Delgado himself. By noon, her group was deleted. By evening, her house was dark. And by the weekend, a for sale sign sat crooked in her yard. She didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just vanished. But her legacy, we made sure that didn't disappear. We never saw Karen again after the house sold. She didn't apologize, didn't refund a cent voluntarily, didn't so much as leave a goodbye post in her compliance group. But in the end, it didn't matter, because the clipboard was gone, the lies had unraveled, and what she left behind, we rebuilt ourselves. The investigation led to 3 formal charges: impersonation of a government entity, fraudulent collection of fines, obstruction of a state-level utility operation. She took a plea deal, paid restitution to 37 households, was barred from participating in any civic organization, HOA, or advisory committee for 10 years. Her accounts were frozen. Her digital compliance Bible was removed from every platform we could find. And the real victory, it wasn't legal. It was local. We formed the Pinefield Neighborhood Forum, not an HOA, not a board, just an open group where everyone's voice mattered. We posted real resources: how to check if your HOA is legally registered, what counts as code enforcement and what doesn't, who to call when someone pretends they have authority they don't. We printed 100 copies of a simple one-page handout and put them in every mailbox. You have rights. No one can fine you without law. We called it the generator notice, a little wink at the moment. The silence broke. The Patel family started a weekend gardening club. Elise runs a Porch Pride newsletter where people submit photos of their flags, flowers, and even their messy driveways, because mess is human. Mr. Callahan finally put up a basketball hoop. He's 74, plays with the neighborhood kids every Saturday. And me, I still inspect the grid, still rotate generators, still carry that vest. But now, when I pull it on, I remember something more: that silence is a system too. And it only breaks when someone stands up and says, "That's not law, That's fear. We live in a time where fake authority travels faster than truth, where clipboards and confidence can bully people into submission, where aesthetic violations are just coded ways to say, you don't belong. But here's the thing. When real power shows up, it doesn't scream, it verifies, it protects, it restores, and sometimes it runs on diesel. Call to action. Have you ever been told to comply by someone who wasn't elected, licensed, or sworn? Check their credentials. Ask questions. And don't let politeness cost you your voice, because justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it starts with a humming generator and a guy in a vest who just came to keep the lights on.